This last week in the news, the state of Utah was mentioned in two concerning articles. The first is that Utah now leads the nation in custody inmate deaths. And the second article was a state lawmaker for the first time is proposing a bill to allow the state to assess and seize control of local county jails that they deem to be ineffective. The cost of housing inmates is increasing, and the rate of which inmates upon release will reoffend is also on the rise. With almost 15 years of law enforcement experience, I can tell you there is a better way. To determine if our correctional facilities are functional and adequate, you simply have to define their basic purpose, which is for a local jail. After somebody has been arrested, they're housed in a local jail until trial. If after trial, their sentencing is to be continued incarceration, they can be sent back to that local jail, or they can be transferred to a state prison. This is where the rehabilitation part is supposed to take place by design. They are called correctional facilities. For rehabilitation to be effective, we need to identify the two common factors for the commission of most crimes. Statistically, most inmates will identify themselves as having a mental wellness concern. Most people with mental wellness concerns will seek out self-medication, even to the point of criminal behavior. This is why it's easy to identify the two contributing factors for most crimes as mental wellness and self-medication. Addressing the problems as we as a society must do, we just need to acknowledge that mental illness and chemical dependency is a medical concern. Failure to do so will result in a continued failure of our local jails and state prisons. This is a picture of a family member of mine, whom I will call Skylar. Skylar, from a very young age, demonstrated natural abilities in science and mathematics, and natural talents in art, and especially music. As Skylar matured, he identified in himself mental wellness concerns. He, like most, sought out self-medication, which led to criminal behavior. This is Skylar's first booking photo. While in jail and in prison, his mental wellness was never properly diagnosed, and his chemical dependency was never addressed. Skylar was able to have a family, but he continued to struggle. As I mentioned, this was Skylar's first booking photo. A few years later, this would be Skylar's last booking photo. As a result of his mental wellness never being properly diagnosed and his chemical dependency never being treated, Skylar, while in a local jail here in Utah, awaiting transfer to the state prison, took his own life. I choose to remember Skylar like this, the young man with a world of promises ahead of him. What I ask each and every one of us to do is contact our legislative representative and ask for the funding to be made available and the resources allocated so that we can properly address our increasing inmate population and their concerns of mental health and chemical dependency, which are the major contributing factors to the majority of crimes that are committed. No prison cell or jailer will ever effectively treat the medical concerns that require a hospital and a doctor. Thank you.
Hello? Okay, just wanted to make sure that was working. I have very exciting news for all of you. I know of a way to completely eradicate stress from each and every one of your lives. That means no more tuition payments, no more dinner with the in-laws. I know how much everyone enjoys that. All it requires is a car and a little bit of force to propel yourself in front of that car while it's moving. Or maybe, as you're cutting up vegetables for dinner, you take that blade and you slide it up your forearm. Or maybe, at the end of a long day, as you're getting ready for bed, you take that belt out of your belt loops and you wrap it around your neck. Suicide and depression are not a joke, and I am here in a desperate attempt to provide even the smallest window into what both of these monsters of our minds are truly like. Now, depression and suicide are often mentioned hand in hand, but they are not mutually exclusive. Just because you have depression does not mean that you will kill yourself. If you're looking for evidence of that statement, here I stand. I was diagnosed with depression about 7 years ago, and I think it's pretty obvious that I'm not dead. But just because it's not guaranteed does not mean they're not related. Over 90% of those that commit suicide are diagnosed with some form of a psychiatric disorder, and over half of that 90% are diagnosed with depression. So what can we do to help those that are afflicted with this disorder? First, I would like to speak to those in the room that do have depression, if there are any. While there are a number of things you should do, such as getting on medication or seeing a counselor, none of that will make a difference if there's not one decision that you decide to make first. You have to decide in here that you want to fight this battle. And it won't be easy. It's one of the hardest decisions that you will ever have to make in your entire life. As I mentioned, I was diagnosed about 7 years ago, and it took me probably a solid 3 years before I finally decided to do something about it. And unfortunately, it will not completely eradicate this problem. If you struggle with genetic depression, you will be struggling with it for the rest of your life. But making that decision inside to do something about it and to fight about it lifts an enormous weight off of your shoulders. It makes day-to-day functionality so much better and is a spotlight in the darkness. For those that don't have depression but know someone that does, the number one absolute most important thing that you need to know is you should not treat this person as if they are different from you. There's nothing wrong with them. They are not sick. They are not a freak. They are simply lacking some chemicals in their mind, and that's it. We need someone there to love and to nurture and to listen to us. And unfortunately, this also won't be easy. I lost a lot of friends because they did not want to help me navigate my way through this darkness. But I can guarantee you that if you do help this person through, they will be indebted to you in a way that you will never be able to understand. My family, who is here tonight, and in particular my sister Lily, have no idea what they do for me every single day and what they have done for me in the past. Lily, I'm not very good with words, you know that, but I love you and thank you for being a spotlight in my darkness. What you should not do, however, if you have decided to not help this person through the darkness, is tell them to kill themselves because nobody cares about their problems, as I was told. Because while I obviously did not kill myself that day, had I been told that on a different day, on a worse day, I don't think I would be here giving this speech right now. Depression affects everybody a little bit differently, but I think it's fair to say that those that have depression see the world through different eyes than those that don't. It is almost impossible to explain the pain and feelings of emotional isolation that render every waking hour an indescribable hell on earth. This was a quote from the brilliant author David Foster Wallace in his short story entitled The Depressed Person. I stumbled across Mr. Wallace's works about 6 months ago, and he is fabulous. I would highly recommend looking into him if you haven't. But there's one passage in particular of his that really spoke to me. In his book entitled Infinite Jest, he gave an analogy about depression. And while I won't be able to put it as eloquently as he did, I'd still like to try and paint this picture for you. I want you all to picture being on the top floor of a skyscraper. There are no stairs, there is no elevator, there is no way down, and this building is on fire. As you cower in the corner, your breaths become shorter and quicker as smoke billows into the room and siphons the oxygen out. You can feel the heat pressing in around you. You can feel the flames licking at the floor beneath your feet. And as your impending demise truly sets in, you look through that smoke and you see a window, and you jump. You don't jump because you want to jump off the top floor of a skyscraper. You do it because it's the only way to escape the insurmountable terror that comes from the flames of that building. Most people that commit suicide do not want to kill themselves. They do so because it is the only way to escape the flames and the monsters of their minds. Now, as I mentioned, I became quite enamored with Mr. Wallace, and I looked a little bit more into his personal life just to learn a little bit more about him. And I found that about 9 years ago, his wife came home, walked through their house to their backyard and their back patio, and it was there that she found his body hanging with his belt wrapped around his neck and a suicide note at his feet. He eradicated the stress from his life because he did not want to fight that internal battle anymore. In his analogy about the burning building, he had one more haunting line that I would like to close with tonight. Those that are down on the ground yelling up, "Just hold on, you can make it, it's okay," they don't understand that jump, not really. You would have to have been there and felt the flames to understand a true terror way beyond falling.
Before I begin tonight, I'd like to take the time to introduce you to a few people. This is Annalisa. She spent time in several homes before aging out of the foster system at the age of 18. When I asked her about her experience, she said, "I felt like my opinion was invalid, and I didn't have a say in anything." This is Riker. He spent time in several homes before returning to his parents at the age of 12. He said, "Whenever I talked to someone who was supposed to help me, it felt like they weren't even listening." And this is me. In preparation for this speech, I went back and found a journal entry from 2015, and it said, "Karen, my caseworker, canceled our meeting again today. I wish I could talk to someone who will listen." The common theme with all of us is we felt like we didn't even have a say in what was supposed to be our lives. On any given day in the United States, there are 428,000 children in foster care. That's almost 500,000 kids. And according to the American Association of Suicidology, children who have spent time in foster care are 2.5 times more likely to seriously consider suicide than those who have not, and 4 times as likely to actually commit suicide. According to the Child and Adolescent Services Research Center, adolescents who have spent time in foster care are 19.2% of adolescents who have spent time in foster care have some form of substance abuse disorder. Now, these aren't problems that are just going to go away. There are definitely policies and laws that need to be in place to protect children and prevent things like this. But today I'm here to talk to you about what you can do and what I can do, what everyday people can do to help foster children. You can listen, speak up, and volunteer for them. When you're talking to someone who's spent time in foster care, oftentimes it's very hard to open up about these experiences. Some things you can do to make it easier are listen without judgment. Don't make comments. Well, say things like, "Well, why didn't you just do this?" Or "Why can't you just do that?" Because it can make the person that you're talking to feel judged and make them close themselves off. Another thing you shouldn't do is interrupt. You shouldn't interrupt a person who's opening up, because it can close them off and shut their train of thought, because it's a coping mechanism for children who've spent time in foster care. Another good thing you can do is offer encouragement. You can't imagine how much just telling a child in foster care, "You're going to make it, you can do it, you're going to be okay." Things like that can really, really help a situation, even if it seems small to you. Annalisa, who I introduced you in earlier, said one of the biggest problems she had when she was talking to people about her experiences is they would minimize her situation because she was in a good foster home. They would say things like, "Well, someone has it worse," or "You should be grateful you got into a good home." Saying things like that really closes off the person, as I said. It really makes them feel like you don't care or that they shouldn't be talking or complaining about their problems. The next thing you can do is speak up for foster children. A lot of times, foster children will not speak up about their issues because the same people they will be complaining to are the same people that put them in this situation. Something you can do is notice signs of depression, which is very common in foster children. Some symptoms are loss of appetite. If you see someone that refuses food often or simply just takes a few bites and pushes their food away, you might consider talking to them, asking them if everything's okay, making sure that they're not suffering. Another symptom of depression is loss of interest in otherwise enjoyed activities. When I spent time in my last foster home, when I first got put there, it was a struggle for me to continue doing things like marching band, JROTC, and the orchestra program, all things I loved with all my heart, but struggled to get through because of the pain I was in because of my situation. Another symptom of depression is isolation. Saying no to being invited out or eating by themselves or just not being able to talk. Something you can do to help with that is to get the person one-on-one. Don't ask them publicly. Ask them face-to-face, one-on-one, and just let them know that you're here for them, and oftentimes it will help immensely. Another common problem with foster children is abuse. It's a very touchy subject for a lot of people, but it needs to be talked about. Some signs of abuse are inappropriate clothing for the weather. Here in Utah, it gets insanely hot during the summer, as we all know. If you see someone that you know or might not even know is in a foster home and they're wearing long sleeves or a jacket and they won't take it off, there might be an injury there's something, or injury they're hiding that they don't want to speak about. Consider asking them privately if they're okay. Another thing is over-explained or under-explained injuries. If someone has a serious bruise on their face and you ask them about it and they say, "Oh, I just tripped," you can't get a bruise across your whole face by tripping, and we all know that, so you might consider asking them about that. Or if they have an obviously rehearsed story about why they have this injury, it's also a sign of abuse. Another sign of abuse is avoiding the home. If they spend every second they possibly can avoiding going home, they miss the bus on accident so they get to stay later, or they just simply ask everyone if you can do something with them all the time, they might be avoiding the abuse that awaits them at home. The last thing that I urge you to do is volunteer. For some reason, volunteering scares the death out of some people, but it's really not that complicated. All you have to do is contact a local agency. Some agencies that operate around us are the Big Brothers Big Sisters, the National Foster Care and Adoption Directory, and Foster Care to Success. Most of these are based in Salt Lake, but you can contact them and they can set you up with areas around here. All you have to do is tell them that this is what you want to do and set up a schedule. It can be once a week, once a month, twice a month. And then you just spend time with the child. You can oftentimes just take them to a movie or spend time with them at the center where you are. And by doing this, you'll change a life. Now, you can't change the whole world at once, but you can change a child's world one at a time. And you never know. They might end up changing your world.
Thank you, Megan. Our next speaker tonight is Mikkel Rivera, a nursing major from Layton, Utah. Mikkel will be speaking to us tonight on her speech titled, "Worthy of Your Dreams."
Weber State University, worthy of your dreams. This has been the school's marketing slogan the last several years. They want students to know that this institution is worthy of our hopes, our goals, and essentially our futures. But when did Weber State become the dream? Well, for each of us in this room, we received 13 years of education prior to attending this university. And upon graduating high school, we had the opportunity to choose any path we wished to take. But millions of children around the world do not have the same opportunities that we do, and many of these children are girls. This chart shows the total percentage of children in attendance of primary schools across the world. As you can see, in countries like North America and Europe, the attendance percentage is extremely high. But when we drop down into third world countries in Africa and South America, the attendance rate drops extremely low. Now, for every 100 boys in attendance of a primary school, there are only 88 girls. This adds to problems like adolescent marriage, adolescent pregnancy, and an extreme spike in the poverty rates among young people. Now, the next picture I want to share with you comes from the jungles of Ecuador. I met these girls on my trip to Ecuador last summer and had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time with them. Many of the girls in this picture do not have the opportunity to attend school for two reasons. The first being that their primary educational facility is too far away to walk to. The second being that even if they lived close enough, their parents can't afford to send both them and their brothers. You see, poverty itself is sexist. Now, a recent study has shown that if we can increase the percentage of women in attendance of primary education, the results would change lives. That 1% increase in attendance would equal a 15% decrease in child mortality rate, meaning over 1 million children's lives would be saved each year by educating their mothers. But let's say the opportunity grows, and these mothers get to attend a secondary education facility. Upon graduation, child mortality rate would drop 49%, saving 3.5 million children's lives each year. Not to mention that these women that graduate are 7 times less likely to contract a sexually transmitted disease. Another study done by the University of Switzerland shows that 6 out of every 100,000 women in a developed country die during childbirth. But in an underdeveloped country, that number jumps to 1,100 women out of every 100,000. These statistics alone show that women born into poverty are extremely discriminated against, and by educating them, their lives can be saved. Now you've seen the problem, but what is the solution? Well, in the year 2000, the National Education Committee met and decided the best way to rid the world of this poverty issue would be to get rid of the tuition costs, meaning that parents are only left with paying for books, supplies, and uniforms. The goal of the year 2015 was set to achieve a universal primary education, meaning that every child in every country of every gender would have an equal opportunity to attend a primary educational facility. Well, the year 2015 has come and gone, and that goal has still not been met. But let's take it back to Weber State. Next semester, tuition at this university is roughly $2,500. $2,500 for our hopes, our goals, and our dreams. But what about these girls? Well, studies show that $20 is the price placed on their futures. $20 will save these children. It will provide books, tuition, and fees for one school year. Weber State University is worthy of our dreams, but what is worthy of theirs? By partnering with companies like World Vision and One, $20 gives these girls a hope. $20 gives them a future and provides an education for the uneducated. Here in this room, we have entrusted Weber State University with our dreams. Now it's time to give these girls lives worthy of their dreams.
Thank you, Mikkel. Our final speaker this evening is Samantha Bunderson. Samantha is an English major from Simi Valley, California. And Samantha will be speaking about recognizing signs and symptoms of child abuse.
In your head, please consider the answer to the following questions. How many of you, if you were to witness a car accident, would report this to the police? What if you saw a fire or your neighbor's house was being broken into? Would you call the authorities? Now, what if you suspected child abuse? Would you call? How many of us know when to call or who to call if we suspect that a child is being abused? Unfortunately, most of us in this room at some point in our lives will encounter a child who is suffering abuse, and it is our responsibility to ensure their safety. When I was living in California working at the Boys and Girls Club, I knew a 7-year-old girl named Ashley. Ashley had bruises that covered her body and stories that didn't quite add up. She had about 2 outfits that she rotated through and complained of her father's excessive alcohol consumption. Ashley also had a shaved head because her father grew tired of caring for her hair. Every child has the right to a happy, safe, and healthy upbringing, and it is our responsibility to familiarize ourselves with the signs and symptoms of child abuse in order for us to recognize when a child is being abused. According to the Child Maltreatment Report, in 2015, over 3 million CPS or Child Protective Service cases were filed. In that same year, 1,670 children died as a result of abuse. That's 2.25 kids in a group of 100,000, meaning in a city the size of Ogden, 2 children will die every year as a result of abuse. According to Stanford Medicine and the Journal of Practicing Nurses, the 3 most common kinds of abuse are neglect, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. Neglect is the failure to provide a child with their most basic needs, including food, water, shelter, etc. Children who are neglected often exhibit poor hygiene, dirt under their fingernails, they're not aware of how to brush their teeth, or reoccurring cases of lice. They are often constantly tired and lethargic. They can be found collecting or begging for scraps of food or school supplies because they don't have access to these materials at home. They also suffer from chronic absenteeism, meaning that their school attendance is sporadic, which severely hinders their academic performance. The second most common kind of abuse is physical abuse. and this is when any adult purposefully harms a child, leaving behind a mark. Indicators of physical abuse include bruising. Up to 12 bruises is normal in a child, especially in the bony areas such as the elbows, knees, or shins. However, frequent bruising on the upper thighs, abdomen, or biceps is extremely uncommon, and we can be aware that this is a sign of abuse. Pinch marks, bite marks, and kick marks that reoccur at high frequencies are also questionable, along with breaks, fractures, burns, or scalds that occur at more than 1 or 2 in a period of any given 6 months. When such injuries occur at such a high frequency, it's understandable that these injuries may not just be accidents. The third most common kind of abuse is unfortunately the most difficult to detect. Sexual abuse is defined as the forced touching or penetration of any child in their private areas, forcing a child to touch an adult in their private areas, or exposing a child to pornography. Children who are sexually abused often wet the bed, soil themselves, have reoccurring nightmares or disturbed sleep patterns. Physical symptoms include children who have constant sore throats, yeast infections, or itching and discomfort in their genital areas. Another indicator of this kind of abuse is children who have knowledge of sexual acts far beyond their years. So what can you do? According to the Tennyson Center for Children, the reason most of us don't report abuse is because we're afraid. We're afraid that we'll put the child in more danger, or that we'll get ourselves in trouble, or that someone will be mad at us. And for many of us, turning a blind eye is simply easier than facing the harsh reality that we live with. However, it's vital that we take 2 steps in order to mitigate child abuse in our nation. The first, we need to familiarize ourselves with the signs and symptoms of abuse so that we can recognize abuse when it is occurring. Second, we cannot hesitate to call. At any moment that we suspect abuse, we can call 911, the local police authorities, or Child Protective Services hotline. Many of us fear that if we make a report and it's a false accusation, that something will happen to the child. However, it's important that we remember that it's simply our duty to report what we see. Trained professionals will then determine whether or not further action needs to be taken to remove a child from their situation, or whether a case needs to be investigated further or not. I often think about Ashley, the 7-year-old girl that I worked with in California. I think about the added months of abuse that she had to endure because I was ignorant to the role that I played in protecting her. No child should be abused, and every child has the right to a happy, safe, and healthy upbringing. Children who are abused often feel betrayed, guilty, forsaken, and abandoned. And it is our responsibility to be their heroes and protectors. We have the potential to save a child's life, and that is a responsibility that we must take seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you to all 5 of our finalists this evening. I think that they deserve one more very large round of applause. At this point, I would like to welcome Dr. Cherie Josephson and Mr. Alan Hall up to the podium to deliver the presentation of honorariums to our 5 finalists this evening. Our first finalist, Jeff Hasty. Our second finalist, Taylor Dawson. Our third finalist, Megan Christensen. Our fourth finalist, Mikel Rivera. And our fifth finalist, Samantha Bunderson. I'd also like to recognize tonight any of our past winners of the Speech Showcase or any past competitors. In the audience, if we have any past competitors, would you please rise? As we move into the concluding element of our show tonight, I would like to thank all in attendance again, our friends, family, special others, the faculty members, administrators, and community members who have been good enough to share their time and talents with us this evening and this semester. I would now like to recognize our distinguished guest, Mr. Alan Hall, who is going to be speaking tonight, delivering some of our closing comments.
Thank you, Dr. Lancaster. Students, I must say, as I sat there, I was moved emotionally. And I thought, what in the world can I do about each of the topics? And by you bringing it to the surface, it should stir all of us to figure out what we might do to help our fellow men, fellow women, right? So thank you for your wonderful speeches tonight. Give them all another wonderful round of applause. I'm really pleased tonight to have President White here and Provost Minor and our good Dean Springer and our wonderful department chair, Cherie Josephson. It's a treat for me to be here to see all the faculty and to see you many students and friends and family of the students who are recognized here tonight. So I have to tell you, it's a joy for me to come and be part of something that's so unique and so powerful. So I'm really happy to be here tonight. It's a treat for me to be with you, to be part of this speech showcase, because I'd never heard of it before. Now I think the provost said we have to come back now every year, don't we, now that we've been once. So it's happy times for me to be here to join with all of you to share in the excitement and celebration of these students who have accomplished much and that we have recognized here tonight. Thank you for inviting me here to speak and to be a part of this. I am a speaker. And so I sat there and watched everything you did. I made mental note. 67 years ago, on a beautiful Sunday morning in Salt Lake City, dressed in dark pants and wearing a white shirt with a tiny clip-on red tie, I gave my first speech. A talk that lasted 2.5 minutes before an audience of 30 children and a few adults. Since as a 5-year-old kindergartner, I had not yet learned to read, any handwritten speech or document would have been a useless tool. So I was obligated to memorize my remarks. As I approached the microphone at the pulpit in the church to deliver my homily, my beloved mother stood by, ready to prompt, encourage, and cheer on her firstborn child. I'm very sure she was quite anxious and wondered if I could withstand the pressure and the excitement of the moment. She had reason to be concerned, knowing how other tiny tots had dissolved into tears or run away or seemed frozen in time when they spoke. Earlier in the week, the topic of my speech had unfolded as we visited Temple Square together, where my sweet mom showed me the towering Siegel Monument and told me the story how prayers to God had brought thousands of hungry birds to area farms that had saved the pioneers' precious crops by eating gigantic swarms of voracious insects called locusts. As I concluded my remarks that day, my loving mother hugged her little boy, told me I had done well, and most importantly, whispered in my ear that she was very proud of me. That wonderful and cherished moment blessed me beyond measure. From then on, when I was asked to speak, I knew it would go well. Today I pay tribute to my devoted mother, my very first communication teacher, who over the years continued to groom me and teach me principles of giving a memorable speech. Since that first short talk in 1950, some of you weren't even here there, were you? Now, over 6 decades later, I have spoken several thousand times to large groups and small ones all over the world with a wide range of interesting topics. As you can see, I really love to speak. I find pleasure, great fulfillment every time I face an audience. Happily, I'm never nervous or anxious. My hands are always dry, and I never wet my pants. Oddly, my heart rate actually goes down. Following every talk, I asked a few individuals who listened what I could do to improve my speech. Most responded that it was a good talk, and others are frank and honest and give great counsel on things that might enhance my next presentation. A memorable example happened years ago when during a talk I used the word snook, S-N-O-O-K, snook, as in I snook away. After I finished my remarks, my wonderful mother-in-law, school teacher, who had heard the word, kindly mentioned that I had incorrectly conjugated the verb, that the proper tense was sneaked, not snook. Please know, ever since then, I have strived to use proper grammar in every talk. Tonight, as I end my and this 2.5-minute talk, I congratulate the wonderful faculty of the Communications Department. You're doing wonderful things here. I appreciate the fact that you're dedicated and you're very professional in teaching students to be masterful communicators. And once again, I thank all of you for this delightful opportunity of being here tonight to celebrate what's going on, and to you students, I give you the greatest congratulations. You have stirred me. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, one last thing. How did I do?
You stay right here. I'll have you move over.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan Hall. That was magnificent. The Department of Communication is dedicated to communicating to the world. We appreciate Alan Hall, his influence, his generosity, his business smarts. He's a man that has done a great deal. I spoke to your biographer, Crystal Lee Beck.
Oh, boy.
She had much to say.
I know she does.
We estimated, and you confirmed it in your speech, that
Yeah.
you have probably delivered more than 3,000 speeches in your lifetime. Because of that, and because of his magnificent aspect of public address, his influence in the community, and particularly at Weber State University, we want to give to you this evening, and this will be an ongoing aspect of our department, is the Freedom Through Rhetoric Award.
Oh, wonderful. President, I think you and I will do some matching walls.
And I want you to know, both of you, I'm coming to your offices in your home. I'm gonna, that better be hanging in there when it does. Now, if you will please, turn to the back of your programs. On the certificates and the awards that were given to President White and to Alan Hall this evening is included the Weber Speaks Anthem. We want you to know that as instructors in the Department of Communication, this is an anthem that we want our students and our community to understand. We want to speak in order to be able to help our communities and to help our world and to institute freedom and democracy. The Weber Speaks Anthem is a call responsive aspect of public address. And so we're going to ask Alan Hall to lead this. As you'll see on the back of the program, it says, when an answer to a problem is needed and you respond, Weber Speaks! I don't think the people at the University of Utah heard that. Now, Alan Hall, will you please lead us in the Weber Speaks Anthem, and let's let those people in Salt Lake hear us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir. All right, is everybody ready? When an answer to a problem is needed, Weber speaks! Whenever conflict or justice demand resolution, Weber speaks! Should fear threaten to silence the voice of freedom, Weber speaks! Thank you.
The events are concluded. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, it is. President White, and with the finalist speakers, please come forward. We would like to get pictures taken with Alan Hall, with President White, their certificates, and the speakers tonight. Thank you. Thank you.